Okay, so we have our lyre of ready shapes. The end pin is finished, the string arm is finished. What we need to do now is to do the final sanding before we do the finishing. I recommend that you use 180 grit on the sides and on the back and on the front. And once we've sanded with 180 grit, once we've done 180 grit, then we'll move on to 240 grit. Basically, we're just trying to remove the scratches from each previous sandpaper. So we go from 180 to 240. We could then go up to 320 grit. When you sand the lyre, make sure you sand round over the edges just a tiny little bit, as the varnish does, the oil or the finish you're using doesn't stick very well to sharp corners. So you want to just very lightly just chamfer the edges a tiny bit, so there's no hard, sharp edges on the instrument. But at this stage, what we're going to do is slightly damp the wood. Now, I'll just show you that. I'll take a sponge and I wring out all the water so that it's only very slightly moist. Now with that, I take the lyre and we rub it over, and we're just going to raise the grain. We're not trying to damp the wood too much. You don't want to warp the instrument with soaking it with too much water, but we're just going to wet the whole instrument all over. We can do it on the sides without any worry about the animal glue. The animal glue will only come apart if we use hot water or too much water. So we're just going to raise the grain. And you can basically go over everywhere you've sanded, including the end grain. You see, it's just making this, it will temporarily turn a darker colour. Okay, now and you can do the front as well. And you might need to soak your sponge again, but again, make sure you wring it out so it's only very slightly moist. We're not trying to saturate the wood, we're just trying to raise the grain. For these lyres is to use a linseed oil finish. Now in the winter time this just doesn't dry very well, so what I tend to do is to do a mix of 50% linseed oil and 50% either turpentine or white spirit. There is an alternative you can use which is called orange oil as well if you can get it, which is less smelly, has less solvents in it. So okay, so we're going to have so here they are, mixture linseed oil, Now, there's one thing about linseed oil is that if you leave it on a rag or a piece of cloth and you crunch it up and you leave this, it will actually chemically heat up and it can cause a fire. So what I've tended to do recently is to just use paper cloths to apply the oil and then to dispose of them in a bucket of water, or you can flush them down the toilet if they're biodegradable, but to not have rags lying around avoids the risk of fire. So you can either dip your rag in the oil. Okay, so we're just trying to flood the instrument. We're not really just trying to get a little bit of oil all over the place. You can see now that the grains come out quite nicely. Now because of the spirit, the oil soaks in quite... I'll come back to that side in a minute. Now if this was the summertime, I would use pure linseed oil, and I would leave the instrument outside in the sun to dry between coats, just for a couple of hours, and that's partly why I enjoy making lyres in the summer, as it enables me to use the sun as part of my finishing process. But in the winter at the moment it's just too cold, and even inside the house during the night time it's quite cold, so the varnish doesn't dry when it's pure oil. Using this mix, even though it's more, there's more solvents coming off, it will still dry. It will still take a couple of weeks to finish this. So every day, so in about an hour now, I'm going to apply another coat and then wipe off as much excess as I can, and then I'm going to leave this until tomorrow when I'll do the same again. And basically, I'll do every day for a week. I'm going to be applying varnish to this instrument, and after about a week, I will probably leave it at that point. We're just trying to seal the wood against moisture. We're not after we don't want to build up a thick finish on the instrument. We're trying to keep it as light as possible, as minimal as possible. I mean, some people might only put a couple of coats on and then decide that's enough. Just see how it looks to yourself. I mean, this is quite a thin coat at the moment. It's going to get a lot more darker before it's finished.